Welcome back to another GTHL team preview show. Today we'll be looking at the Mississauga Reps. I'm Thomas West, he's Liam Crothers, and the Reps were a strong team this year. They're up in the pack with some of the top teams in the GTHL, and they had the ability to surprise a few teams.
Yeah, and coming off of some years where they were very successful in the way that they finished the season, a little bit of turnover, but some of the mainstays were still there. We'll get into them, both the forward line and the defense, and then in net, they had a really stabilizing presence, but all of that will be delved into here in a little bit.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. We'll start with the lines. And you see here they had some very strong centers up the middle. Obviously, Ivan FABJAN was the top line center, but Daniel MARKEVYCH is another guy who easily could have slotted in on that top line, but a lot of strength up the middle.
Spoilt for center talent, and as you mentioned, MARKEVYCH there are listed as third line spot, but he could play up on the top power player on the first line as well. LALKIN was a key contributor on offense. Savard and Bray on the back end were great for them. Sebastian Monaco in net saved them more than a few games. They got contributions from everywhere in their lineup. The forwards were great. Defense worked effectively as well, and as I mentioned, the goaltending was good all season.
Yeah, and we also enjoyed watching Ben LALKIN. He was fantastic in the forward group and did a lot of the scoring, a guy with a ton of speed. But a strength for this team seemed to be the defense as well, as they were one of the strongest defensive teams in terms of playing defense, but also scoring as well. Obviously, Will Bray, a guy that comes to mind, Olivier Savard as well.
And I think it's almost an uncoachable asset, the ability to have that innate hockey sense that I feel some of these defensemen do possess. Savard was great on the back end. His decision-making was good. And Bray, the same case there. The decision-making was always crisp. He wasn't putting himself into a position where he was going to be caught out. He didn't leave his defense partner out to dry in any instance. Their goaltender did end up facing a lot of shots, but maybe you look to some of the forwards to block some more shots or the defense to cut some passes out. But when you notice them on the ice, it was usually because they were making good things happen.
Okay, let's take a look at the standings now, and as you can see, the Mississauga Reps were able to finish in 5th, right up there in that top group with the Vaughan Kings, the Titans, the Marlies, and the Canadians. Those were the top teams in the GTHL. They were right up there with them. We flip over now to the myhockeyrankings.com. Things change a little bit, and this is in big part to that final game where they were battling for playoff seeding position with the Vaughan Kings.
Yeah, and here the Reps are ahead of the Kings, and this is conjugated because of the strength of tournament schedule that the team might have been facing. You can see some of the numbers here indicate that the Reps did have a good season. They were right there in the middle of the pack, one of the best teams in Ontario, and you can see why. They were good defensively. Their goal differential was positive, and strength of schedule is right up there with some of the top teams.
Yeah, and speaking about some of those top teams as well, something that we saw from those teams that was a pretty common theme was that they had a lot of forward depth. They could roll out 3 lines and be comfortable with pretty much all of them. Do you think that theme kind of stayed the same as a strength for this team?
Well, we listed Daniel MARKEVYCH as our third line center. I think that speaks to the depth that this team was able to roll out. And you can put some contributing wingers there. You can put guys that are a little bit more physical. You can put some higher skill guys there. I think it explains why the Reps were so successful because of that forward depth.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, we had a lot of fun calling these games and watching the Mississauga Reps play. So we put together some projections for the upcoming OHL draft. We'll start with yours.
We did. Ben LALKIN's the guy that I've got in the first round. From there, I've got Campbell, Savard, Bray, and MARKEVYCH in rounds 2 to 3. Rounds 4, we start with the goaltender Monaco, and then it's FABJAN, it's Levin, CHRISTIE, Giles, and HEBBLETHWAITE. From there, it's Batcher-Canov, PANGRETITSCH, McConnell, Fritz, and then Akbari, Zingaro, and Vitisse. And I've got LALKIN as the only guy up there in round 1. His talent was obvious. And when you look into rounds 2 to 3, I've got Campbell there as well as Bray. I don't think that's any knock on their game. I think it's more just a saturation of talent in the first round. I think a lot of those guys have potential to go early and mid second round.
Yeah, so LALKIN obviously has the first round potential. He's got the speed, he's got the shot, the ability to get around guys. Olivier Savard was someone who impressed us on the defensive side of things. Lockdown defender, he could get into the offense and control the power play.
Yeah, and it's never easy coming over from a province that you're not familiar with. And, he spent some time here in Ontario. I think he had played well, and I think he showed enough to surprise some scouts and really get him onto some radars. We saw defensively he was very sound. He's got some offensive upside that I think can really translate at the next level. I'm not sure when he'll be taken as a defenseman, but I suspect somewhere within the first 5 defensemen picked. I think he's got that kind of upside.
Okay, as we flip over to my radar here are my draft projections. So I have 2 players going the first round. from this Mississauga Reps team. Ben LALKIN and Daniel MARKEVYCH as well, a guy who we didn't get to see as much on the games we broadcast, but I do believe that he is a highly touted prospect and has the potential to go in the first round. Will Bray, Olivier Savard, Campbell, and FABJAN. A couple centers there that were important for this team, and as well, Bray and Savard were great on the defensive side of things. HEBBLETHWAITE, Sebastian Monaco, he has the potential to go pretty high for a goalie considering where goalies usually go in the draft.
Yeah, and he's not someone that you'll see on every draft projection board amongst the top goaltenders, but I think that makes him a bit of a sleeper when it comes to this draft because he's got a ton of potential. I mean, MARKEVYCH you had there in the first round is another guy I want to highlight. It's the situation with playing time, and we didn't get to see him as much as we would have liked, but you talk to everybody, and they rave about this guy's ability in the offensive zone. Even with the lack of game time that we were able to bring to you in our full games on YouTube, I can guarantee he's going to go early on because that's how good this guy is.
Yeah, why we had him right up there in the top rounds. As we move over to a player spotlight, someone that we want to look out for as we've been watching these games. We'll start with yours.
I mean, Sebastian Monaco, personally, and this is between you and I here on the Six Hockey, he's regarded as one of the most skilled goaltenders in this class. And he's got a real stabilizing presence back there. I mean, he's so good at, keeping his team in games. You talk to everybody around the team. They know how important he is to their success. Without him, it's likely that the team struggles a little bit more. He was so good, so consistent. He saved more than a few games. I mean, there are instances where the shots will be 9-2, and the Reps will be winning with 2 shots because Monaco stopped 7 in a row while the puck stayed in the offensive zone. He is that good, that stabilizing. He is going to be a great find for whoever decides to take him.
Yeah, great between the pipes. We want to highlight some players that may not necessarily be going in the first or second round, but someone who's maybe a bit of a sleeper pick and may stand out if a team is to draft them late rounds.
I'm going to start with Tucker McConnell-Fritz, and this is an interesting player because as a defenseman, he didn't get as much shine as a Savard or a Bray did, but I thought he used his size very effectively. He's not the biggest body, but he plays big. He likes to throw the body around, and I think that aggressiveness and that tenacity on the back end is going to make him a really useful tool to whoever takes him in the OHL draft.
Yeah, and another guy as well, Will Bray. This is a guy who I was impressed with when we were able to see them in the games that we did broadcast, a guy who had an injury, so I'm a little bit afraid that he may get a little bit overlooked in this upcoming draft. This is a guy who he elevates the play of his teammates around him. He has great hockey IQ. He can skate the puck, he can shoot the puck, and he has a knack for finding the back of the net.
I thought it was interesting that we had both highlighted defensemen when we started off the show talking about the forward depth, but then we looked at the contributions from defense, and I mean, Tucker McConnell-Fritz wasn't a name that we mentioned up there with Savard and Bray, but I do think that Bray played a huge role in the way that the offense operated. We only got to see a little bit of him, but in the games that we did see, I think we were both very impressed.
Okay, this is a very loaded segment that we have coming up, and we're talking about the changes that this team has had to make. A lot of new players are coming in, and a lot of players are going out, which we'll start with Ben LALKIN, Mike LEVIN, Wolf GILES, Patrick Hanov, Zingaro. Pretty much the entire team is changing.
I mean, Stephen CAMPBELL moves to the Toronto Marlies, and then Sebastian Monaco, the goaltender that we raved so much about earlier on, he was going to be making his way to the Toronto Nationals, so it would have been interesting to see the kind of impact that losing a stud goaltender like him would have had on the team. Unfortunately, the season wasn't able to be played. I thought he was very good, but we can't just talk about the players that are moving out of the system. We have to talk about the players that they're bringing in to try to fill those holes, or would have been trying to bring in to fill those holes. I mean, there's a ton of talent here. LeMan is the first name that jumps out to you. JJ Franceschetti, coming from Notre Dame, they've got a long history of producing good players, a lot of NHL talent as well. I mean, he would have made a big impact, I'm sure. Cooksey in there, Mayo as well. Luca Morelli was a good player, again, from the Don Mills Flyers that I thought was going to make an impact. And as they lose Sebastian, or would have been losing Sebastian Monaco, Jaden Tang would have been coming in to try to fill that hole. A great goaltender in his own right, had a good season with the Don Mills Flyers, and it would have been interesting to see how he would have meshed with the rest of the team.
Yeah, and a guy who's coming into this team as well, JJ Franceschetti, we saw. This is a guy who's extremely tough. He's a guy who's really hard to play against. The first thing you notice about him is the amount of work that he puts in behind the scenes to get himself ready to play on the ice. He's one of the toughest guys on the ice all the time. He's hardworking, and this guy certainly has a knack for finding the back of the net with all of his tenacious play on the ice. And with all the changes going out in terms of the lineup, the same thing happened on the coaching side of things. Matt Carente and Mike Catenacci were the coaches for the Mississauga Reps in many seasons prior to the 2020-21 season. Catenacci has a ton of experience as a hockey player. Carente as well. They had a ton of coaching experience, and they led this team to many successful seasons with the Mississauga Reps. But we have a new coaching change now, and Colin Chalk is coming in to control this team. This is a guy that played 368 games between junior and many professional games as well. He has a ton of experience at the coaching level as a professional coach all around the world. This is going to be a guy who is going to be a valuable attribute in gelling together a new team.
I mean, he does have a lot of talent. I mean, you can see there on the screen a ton of games played between the junior and professional level. That's a lot of experience. But, you have to notice that this coach, he's a bit on the younger side, and that was the case that we saw with Catenacci, and it's a bit similar as we see with Chalk. And I think it's obvious that the Reps are trying to stick with that young coaching core that are going to try to elevate these players because there is a closer connect there between those guys, right? And the talent level is very, very high in the GTHL, so you need high-level coaching talent that's able to bring the best out of those players, and I think Colin Chalk is a great move for them.
Yeah, and what's interesting as well is we have an opportunity to look at what some of the lines would have been as we take a look right now. All the players highlighted in red there, these are the people filling in, and boy, that takes up quite a lot of the screen, so here's what we would have seen.
It's interesting that you see two of the first three forwards on the top line. Christie's going to be centering the new acquisitions, Lamanna and Franceschetti. And then on the back end, the first two defensemen are both acquisitions. Morelli is a great player that we saw a bit when he played, and I thought his impact would have been obvious for the way that the Reps would have tried to move forward.
Yeah, Robert Palermo as well on that back end, a physical force, something that he could really fill in with that team. I wish we could have seen this team play because there's a lot of changes, and they certainly would have been an exciting team to watch in the 2020-2021 season. But now we are approaching the OHL draft, and they will have bigger ambitions on their mind. That does it for us on the team preview show presented by the Six Hockey, Thomas West alongside Liam Crothers. We'll see you next time.